Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You ready to maybe get a little uncomfortable today?
Oh, always.
Okay, good. Because today we're going to be talking about global food insecurity.
Yeah.
It's not exactly, the most fun topic to think about,
Yeah.
but it is something that impacts so many people around the world.
Absolutely.
Way more than I think most of us realize. We're looking at this blog post from the Herbalife Family Foundation, and they highlighted some pretty shocking stats from the FAO.
Right. The Food and Agriculture Organization.
The FAO, yes, thank you. And their report, the numbers are just kind of staggering.
They really are. Even looking at their 2021 report, which showed that 2.3 billion people,
Wow.
almost 30% of the global population, was dealing with either moderate or severe food insecurity.
Okay, so 30%, that's obviously a huge chunk of people. But
Yeah.
can you break that down for me a little bit? Like, what does moderate or severe food insecurity actually mean in real life?
Sure. Yeah. It's definitely a spectrum. But moderate insecurity is, where people are having to skip meals. Sometimes they have to cut back on portions, or they're constantly worried about where that next meal is going to come from.
Right.
Severe insecurity is even worse. It's where families are consistently going hungry, adults are going days without food, and, children are showing signs of malnutrition.
So it's not just, missing a snack here and there. This is like serious stuff.
Yeah, this is, really, really serious.
And then, the pandemic obviously didn't help things.
No, absolutely not. In fact, the FAO report points to the pandemic as a major factor,
Right.
saying that it added almost 150 million people to the ranks of the undernourished.
Wow.
Yeah, and they estimate that a total of 828 million people were affected by hunger in 2021 alone.
Gosh, that many people. It's like hard to even wrap your head around that number.
It's a truly global crisis, and unfortunately, it's not affecting everyone equally.
Right, of course.
The FAO report actually breaks down the numbers geographically, and it's, kind of interesting to look at that breakdown.
Yeah, what's it look like?
We see that 278 million hungry people live in Africa, 425 million in Asia,
Wow.
and another 56.5 million in Latin America and the Caribbean.
So it's very clearly not like an even distribution of resources and access.
Yeah.
Why are those particular regions hit so much harder than others?
Well, that's where things get really complex.
Yeah.
It's not just, one single thing. It's like this whole web of different interconnected factors. You have to think about poverty, conflict, the effects of climate change, existing inequalities, and they all kind of work together to create this like perfect storm,
Right.
making it just incredibly difficult for people to reliably get the food that they need.
Could you give me an example? Like, how does climate change play into that exactly?
Okay, sure. Well, let's take sub-Saharan Africa, for example.
Right.
We know that droughts are becoming way more frequent and severe there because of climate change.
Right.
And they're just absolutely decimating crop yields. So when there's less food available, prices skyrocket.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it even harder for families who are already struggling to afford to put food on the table.
So it's not just about growing enough food in the first place. It's about, whether people can actually afford it.
Exactly. And then when you add things like conflict into the equation, it gets even more complicated because food distribution networks get disrupted. Farmers are driven from their land. Supply chains break down. People are displaced.
Right.
It just creates like a whole other layer of challenges.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So we're painting a pretty bleak picture here.
Yeah, a little bit.
But we're going to get into solutions and more in the next part of this deep dive. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Yeah, it's just heartbreaking to think about, families going hungry because of all these forces that are completely out of their control. And it sounds like, if anything, things are going to get worse before they get better.
Unfortunately, yeah, the projections aren't super optimistic. The FAO estimates that nearly 670 million people will still be facing chronic undernourishment by 2030.
That's not that far away.
No, not at all. It's just 7 years away. So, that's a pretty stark reminder of the urgency of this issue.
Yeah. I can't even imagine what the world will look like if we don't find a way to, turn those numbers around.
Right.
What are the long-term consequences if we just stay on this course?
Well, if we fail to address food insecurity on a global scale, we're looking at a cascade of consequences. And it's not just about, individual suffering, although that is obviously a huge concern.
Of course.
Chronic hunger leads to malnutrition, especially in children,
Right.
which then impacts their development, physically and cognitively. It makes people more vulnerable to diseases. It weakens entire workforces. It ultimately drags down economic productivity.
Right.
And then when you combine all that with the instability that comes from social unrest, I mean, you've got a recipe for some truly devastating consequences.
It's not just a humanitarian crisis. It's a
Yeah.
threat to like global security and stability.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it.
It sounds like we're talking about a ticking time bomb.
It really is, but amidst all this kind of bleakness, there are people and organizations working tirelessly to address this crisis.
Right.
And I think the Herbalife Family Foundation, whose blog post we're discussing today, is a really good example of that.
Yeah.
They're actively involved in combating hunger through their Casa Herbalife program.
Yeah, I was really struck by that initiative. They're providing millions of dollars in funding to over 170 organizations around the world.
Right.
And it's not just a one-size-fits-all approach. They're supporting orphanages, hospitals, schools.
Yeah.
They're really tailoring their approach to specific community needs.
Exactly. Their focus is on providing nourishment and support to those who are most vulnerable. And I mean, their impact is undeniable in 2022 alone. The Herbalife Nutrition Foundation served over 229,000 children through their Casa Herbalife program.
That's incredible. It's like really inspiring to see an organization putting their resources to such good use. But I am kind of curious, what are some of the challenges that an organization like H&F faces in tackling a problem this massive?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is sustainability. I mean, providing food aid is obviously crucial in the short term,
Right.
but it's not a long-term solution to truly address the root causes of food insecurity. We need to look beyond just providing meals.
So what else needs to happen? What are the other pieces of this puzzle? You're right. It can't just be about like putting food on the table today.
Yeah.
We have to address the systems that are causing these problems in the first place. So what does that actually look like?
Well, it requires a really multifaceted approach. We need to think about things like empowering local farmers with sustainable agricultural practices,
Okay.
helping them build resilience to climate change so they can increase their yields even when we're facing more extreme weather patterns. And of course, addressing conflict and promoting peace are just absolutely crucial. I mean, without stability, it's nearly impossible to create a sustainable food system.
Yeah, it really speaks to how interconnected all these global challenges are. You can't separate hunger from climate change or poverty. It's all part of the same like complex web.
Exactly. It's a systemic issue that demands systemic solutions. And that's where, governments and policymakers come in. They have a crucial role to play in creating policies that support sustainable agriculture, promote fair trade, and address the root causes of poverty and inequality.
Yeah, it sounds like we need a whole paradigm shift.
Yeah.
It's not just about throwing money at the problem. It's about fundamentally changing the way we approach food production and distribution
Absolutely.
on a global scale.
I think that's exactly right. It requires a shift in mindset, a recognition that food security is not just about charity, it's about justice. It's about ensuring that everyone has the right to access the nutritious food they need to live a healthy and fulfilling life.
So, if our listeners standing there thinking, okay, this is huge, this is overwhelming, what can I possibly do? What would you say? Where do we even begin to make a difference?
Well, first of all, I would say don't underestimate the power of awareness. The more people understand the complexities of food insecurity, the more likely we are to see real change. Talk about it with your friends and family, share information on social media, educate yourself on the issues. That's a powerful first step.
Yeah, knowledge is power, for sure. And then from there, you can start to think about where your own passions and skills might align with some of the solutions we've talked about.
Right.
Maybe you want to support organizations like the Herbalife Nutrition Foundation, who are working on the ground to provide immediate relief. Or perhaps you're more drawn to advocating for policy changes that address the root causes of hunger.
Exactly. There's so many different ways to get involved, whether it's volunteering your time, donating to organizations working in this space, or using your voice to push for change.
Yeah.
Every action, no matter how small it may seem, contributes to the collective effort to create a more just and equitable food system.
Well, this deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It's so easy to get caught up in our own day-to-day lives and just kind of forget about the millions of people around the world who are struggling just to put food on the table.
Yeah.
But the reality is this is a crisis that affects us all. And it's going to take all of us working together to find those lasting solutions.
I couldn't agree more. The future of food security depends on our collective action.
Mhm.
It's a challenge for sure, but it's also an opportunity to create a more just and sustainable world for everyone.
So to our listeners, we leave you with this: what role will you play in shaping the future of food? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.